Welcome back, everybody, to a brand new episode of the Point Average Podcast, episode 10. This is the first week of just me and Matthew in here. We were joined by our good buddy Cade Powell the other day, who made for a pretty good show. I think probably one of the more entertaining shows we've done. Um, but we're back to talk more NFL football. Matt, how's it going, man?
Doing good, doing good. Another late podcast recording. Um, Not really. I guess you could say not really a lot on the agenda tonight, but still getting to talk football. So as always, looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and NFL is kind of getting to where there's not as many storylines really compared to college. But NFL is definitely a lot more entertaining. Um, I'm enjoying watching the NFL a lot more than I have been in recent years. But yeah, like I said, NFL just doesn't have as many storylines, so there's not as much to talk about. Um, but it's still enjoyable nonetheless. But some of the storylines we could talk about are some of the additions and the player movings of around the league. And last week we got to look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and their first real test since acquiring Antonio Brown and making the moves that they did. Um, and they got absolutely slaughtered by the New Orleans Saints. What do you think went wrong? What was it just kind of like um, getting used to getting a new guy into the system, making sure everybody got their touches, or was it just a bad game overall by the Buccaneers?
I still feel like they haven't got it figured out in the backfield. I feel like as far as receiving wise, like Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, now Antonio Brown, Gronk, those guys. I feel like they've been consistent the whole season. What I feel like is their biggest struggles in the backfield. I don't can they have they established a run game at all? It didn't look like I think they Leonard Fournette and Ronald Jones combined under 100, 111 yards, I think. Yep.
Yeah, it wasn't a lot. Um, but yeah, like you said, I think it's just they're just kind of relying too much on Tom Brady, relying too much on the receivers and the tight ends that they have around them. Now they have probably the best playmaker core in the league with Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Scotty Miller's really impressed me this year. You just add AB, you have Ronald Jones, Leonard Fournette, Gronk. Um, I'm sure I said Mike Evans, but just in case I didn't,
Yep.
the list goes on and on of guys that you can get the ball to and they can make plays. So I think it's just they've had so much pressure and their defense is playing so well that everyone's really expecting them to perform. But like this is still a Bruce Arians offense that no one ever has success in their first year in. I think Carson Palmer struggled with it his first year in it. Jameis Winston obviously throws for 30 touchdowns or 30 interceptions last year.
Yeah.
Threw for 30
30 for 30.
touchdowns. Yeah, threw for 30, but he also threw for 30 picks. So yeah, I still think it's just kind of everybody learning the system really, because AB's having to learn it. Scotty Miller's having to learn it.
Yep.
They have Josh Pearson on their active roster now. He's having to learn it. It's his first year. Fournette's first year. Um, Gronk's first year. So you have all these guys that are good NFL players, but they're still in a brand new system, having to learn it. You didn't get your normal camp reps. You didn't get the spring training. You
Yep.
didn't get this, that, and the other. So I think it's just you're seeing this growing pains, and it's a lot worse this year just because of the pressure that was on them.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I did Tom Brady's he's on a 2-year deal, correct? Yeah, see, like I feel like maybe he knew going into it the first year would kind of be a struggle. They'd kind of learn a few things about themselves, and then next year, be a different story. That's what I think, at least.
Yeah, I think nonetheless that I could still see them kind of squeezing into the playoffs this year. Um, just because I'm an NFC so awful, the only person out of the NFC getting in is the champions. You could see whoever finishes possibly third in the NFC West or the NFC South getting in, and I believe there is 7 teams getting in instead of 6 this year, so that's going to help them too. Um, but nonetheless, yeah, like you said, I think playoffs for sure next year. They're kind of grooming for next year. It's just there's a reason he signed a 2-year deal and not a 1 year, is because he knew that the first year may not go as planned, but you always have next year to kind of fall back on.
Yeah, if one thing's for sure, I'm not going to doubt Tom Brady at all. So, and their season's not over. I still think they're a playoff team. I think they're going to, potentially win the first round, maybe two. But, we'll see.
Yeah, well, let me ask you this on the flip side of that. Do you think the struggles in New England are quarterback struggles? Are they coaching struggles? Are they front office struggles? Bill Belichick is the GM up there as well. Are they in like a sort of a rebuild, or do you think it's just them kind of not knowing what the future holds as far as like the quarterback position for them?
I think New England kind of runs into the same problem as maybe like the Texans or somebody like that. They lack on, playmakers. Julian Edelman's been out most of the year, hasn't been his typical self. Running back's been a toss up, different game, different person, that has a decent game. But, Cam Newton, somebody I'll talk about later in our stardom sit I feel like he's been struggling, this year, and I don't know if it has something to do with all the changes around the league, as far as COVID and all the new adjustments and stuff. But Cam Newton is definitely not impressed me this year. I was kind of high on him. We talked about it in week one going into the season. I'm not going to doubt him the rest of the season. He had a good game last week, but that was the New York Jets. So who knows? To be honest,
Yeah, I don't think you can blame Cam. I don't think it's Bill's fault. I think he talked about the other day in an interview where he was like, it's no secret we went all out the past couple of years. It worked out for us. We had 5 AFC championships, 2 Super Bowls, 3 Super Bowl appearances, this, that, and the other. So it's like it's no secret what we did, and now we're kind of reaping what we sowed on it. I don't know if that's technically the right English there, but you get what I'm saying. But yeah, so I think it's going to be interesting. I think this off season you're going to see the Patriots start to make moves, maybe clear some cap space, start looking for the future. Um, who knows if Cam's going to come back? Somebody, uh, analyst for a major network, was talking one day about Cam retiring after this year, and I was like, that doesn't even make sense. I was like, why would he retire 1 year? Now, yes, he's had injuries and stuff like that, but I still don't think it's warranting him retiring at this point in his career. So, do you think they stick with Cam or try to stick with Cam, or do you think they move to Stidham? Do you think they draft somebody, maybe Mac Jones, or
it's tough to say right now. I'm still, like I said a while ago, I'm not going to doubt Cam by no means. But talking about retirement, I was going to bring something up too. Do you think Coach Belichick's getting ready to retire? It's crossed my mind a couple times. This season's not been, how it's typically been for him. But, how much does he have left is the question I guess I should ask.
I don't think he's getting ready. I think it's with coaches, it's kind of hard to tell when they're actually getting ready to retire. Because I mean, you look at Saban, and it's like he's gonna retire in the next 2 or 3 years, but then like he's 60 something, like doesn't really have any quit in him. Like he could be around another 20 years, and none of us kind of expect that. Because I mean, obviously he's going to retire at Alabama, um, but it's like, is that in the next 4 years or is that in the next 20 years? You don't know. And I think Bill Belichick's the same way. I don't see him. I don't see him retiring this year or in the next 2 or 3 years. Um, and I think if he does retire, he won't. I don't think he'll give up that GM position. I think he'll just kind of let go of his head coaching duties and focus as a GM rather than just retire and step away from football altogether.
Yeah, he's the best coach in the league, if not best coach living, um, for a reason. So, Can't doubt him. I'd love to see him go a few more years, rebuild the Patriots, make them a Super Bowl contender again.
Yeah, and it's nice that there's finally someone else in the AFC East. Is it? Is that are they in the AFC East?
Yep.
Yeah, it's finally nice to have someone else in that division that could win the conference with Buffalo. I think they're like 6-2 on the year right now, playing really well. Josh Allen off to an MVP start to start the year, kind of mellowed out, just kind of even keel since then. Not really the hype that was through the first 3 or 4 weeks, but I am glad that there's somebody else in that division that is a actual front runner opposed to just New England.
Yeah, it's always good to see, somebody different. And, speaking of underdog, the Dolphins are 2 games ahead of the Patriots right now. So it's definitely been a mix up than what we've seen, I guess, pretty much our whole life, especially since we have been into the NFL.
Yeah, I mean the Dolphins are not a team that you want to sleep on right now. Some people question them starting Tua. Uh, I don't think it was more questioned of is now the right time to start Tua. It was more just you're on a 2 game winning streak. You're playing well. You know, Ryan Fitzpatrick is playing well. You have a legit shot for the first time in a while to make the playoffs. Why would you ruin that? But on the flip side of that, they done it. Tua is 2-0. Hasn't thrown a pick yet. Um, was strip sacked like his first possession, maybe first play, and I don't think he's turned the ball over since then either. Maybe one other time. But as far as I know, like they're still in a really, really good position to probably make the playoffs, depending on how the rest of the divisions pan out. I think they need some help in order to win the AFC North. What was it? AFC East.
East.
Yeah, I think they need some help to win it, but I don't think it's out of the question at this point in the season.
Yeah, definitely not a team that you can't just walk over. Um, they've definitely surprised us. Me and you have talked about it. They've surprised us this year a bunch. Especially their defense. I think their defense is the key for sure.
Yeah, their D's playing out of their mind. I think that's really they're overlooked. Like back when Fitz was playing really well, everybody was like, "Oh, this is Ryan Fitzpatrick carrying the Dolphins." I think it was kind of the opposite. I think that was really when the defense started to blossom. And Ryan Fitzpatrick, the offense was just exploding, but the defense was playing really well at that time too. And I think the defense is the reason they beat the Rams, and ultimately the reason they beat the Cardinals. Now, obviously the
Yeah.
offense put up points, but the defense still played really well and stopped a high-powered offense. They held D-Hop to like almost nothing, I'm pretty sure. Especially compared to his normal average. D-Hop was definitely
Yeah.
down. Um, but yeah, so Dolphins are definitely someone to keep an eye out on, and it's not the Bills division yet. But on the flip side of that, I don't think it's the Patriots, and I don't see them making the playoffs or winning the AFC East.
Yeah, it's definitely the Bills to lose. I think they've pretty much got it in the bag, I guess you could say, sitting at 7-2. But it's not over, and they've got a tough schedule ahead. So who knows how it's going to end up? I'd love to see the Dolphins make a playoff run. Definitely be the Cinderella team.
Yeah, Dolphins making the playoff run be the talk of the NFL probably for the full off season. But I'll tell you a team that I'm looking forward to seeing if they can make a playoff run. That's the Carolina Panthers. You get Christian McCaffrey back last week, but he's banged up, hurt his shoulder, listed as day to day. I think he's still listed as questionable for Sunday. I think he'll play nonetheless, but I think the Panthers are another team that their defense is kind of the reason that they've had so much success this year. You know, Teddy Bridgewater coming in, signing a 3 or 4 year deal to where he is basically you know, he has solidified himself as the Carolina Panthers starting quarterback for the next few seasons. So he don't have to come in and worry about, obviously everyone has to worry about losing their job, but I think the way he's played all year, he's played with a chip on his shoulder. He's played with something to prove. And I think he's set the Carolina Panthers up in a really good position to possibly beat the Buccaneers or the Saints, depending on how things play out, to win the NFC South and make playoffs if they don't.
Yeah, it's tough to say sitting at 3-6. You know, they're sharing the same record as the Falcons, and you wouldn't tell by if you've been watching the games how the season's been. You know, Carolina had that hot streak right there at the beginning while the Falcons were blowing leads as usual, but they would definitely have to win some games. I know they've lost 4 in a row, so definitely got to turn that around this week. Who are they playing this week? Tampa Bay. Yep,
Yeah.
at home, Tampa Bay. But without Christian McCaffrey, I kind of feel like they're not complete. They've been competing really really good. Definitely impressed me. They're a good fantasy team. They got a lot of players that are very roster worthy on their team, but until Christian McCaffrey gets back, I don't see them making the playoffs. That's just my take.
Yeah, I think. I mean, it's hard to tell because like when McCaffrey went out, everyone kind of wrote off the Panthers. It was like now you got the pressure on Teddy Bridgewater, who's only been there for I think 2 weeks at the time. When McCaffrey got hurt, it was like week 2, week 3. So it's like how well are they actually going to be able to perform? And then things roll around. Mike Davis gets in there, and you see how they start clicking. I think they lose to the Chiefs by just a few. I'm gonna pull up their schedule really quick, but things started to roll. So McCaffrey goes out. They beat the Chargers, beat the Cardinals, beat the Falcons. They ultimately lose 4 straight, but they lost by 7, 3, 8, and 2. They lost by 2 points to the Chiefs. And that was the first game, like I said, the first game back with McCaffrey. And so then you finish up with play the Buccaneers, and then you have the Lions, Vikings, Broncos, Packers, Washington, and the Saints. So I mean, you still have 2 division games left. That I think that's the biggest thing is you only have 2 division games left where you are one. Let's see. They're 1-3 right now, but you could easily finish 3-3 in the NFC South and find yourself at that 2 spot. Because I think the Falcons are the same thing. I think they're 1-3. Their only
Yep.
win coming against Carolina, and then Tampa Bay is 0-2 against New Orleans. So it's possible. It's very difficult. They need some other
Yep.
things to go their way in other divisions, but like I said, I think you can rule out the NFC East. Um, I think Carolina has a legit shot whether McCaffrey's in or out.
Yeah, it's tough to say, but you know, as far as their scores, like you said, how much they've lost by, it's definitely a team that's proved that they can compete with these teams that have already solidified a playoff spot. I guess you could say like the Chiefs and the Saints, you know, practically. But if they make the playoffs, I'll be shocked. But right now, it's just hard to see it without Christian McCaffrey because of how valuable he is.
Yeah, I mean, coming off in what some would say an MVP season, had Lamar not had the season that he had last year, to me he was the MVP. I think he outperformed Lamar, but just because Lamar was who he is, um, that's why he won it. Just because he was a quarterback. And it kind of goes back to the Heisman talk with college. Running backs, receivers, defensive players altogether are always at a disadvantage to a quarterback just because of what the quarterback means to a team and how many yards, all-purpose yards they can put up both through the air and on the ground.
Yeah.
Um, I'll ask you this: is there any other team that you're looking at as a possible sleeper to turn this thing around the back half of the season and maybe make a play at run at the playoffs?
If there is going to be a team, to me, it's going to come out of the AFC. You know, the Steelers are sitting at 8-0, but has anybody really talked about them competing for a Super Bowl, you know, being in the same conference as the Chiefs? I don't see them. So, I mean, you can't really call them a sleeper based on their record, but they're definitely not talked about as much as what their record is. But, you know, last night, I mean, you talked about it, the Colts. I think the Colts' defense is good enough to give them a good run in the playoffs. Um, as far as making it to the conference championship, I don't think so. But out of the AFC, I think the Steelers, Ravens, Chiefs, that's really The Bills definitely in the mix, but I think the Steelers are a team that deserve more praise than what they get. Typically being in the same division as Kansas City.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with the Colts and them being overlooked is just their inconsistency. I think they come out one week and they're very hot, they play really well, and then the next week they're like a completely different team where they can't get anything going. The Steelers have had one bad games out of 8, and that was last week against the Cowboys, where I think we fell victim to this. Everybody knew the Steelers were going to win that game. Um, the Steelers knew they were going to win that game. The Cowboys knew they were going to win that game, and it was just the Cowboys had nothing to lose and came out and played like they had nothing to lose and almost pulled off an upset. But I think the reason that the Steelers have been so overlooked is just because everyone knows what the Chiefs are capable of. Everybody knows the Ravens have a really good defense, and that kind of overshadows their offense. Because I don't think the Ravens' offense is that good, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Collectively as a whole, their defense is just so dominant that Lamar and Mark Ingram and Hollywood Brown are able to put up enough points to solidify a win, basically riding on the tail of that defense.
Yeah, especially in terms, talking points in terms of fantasy. I think, Lamar's hit or miss this year. And then I think Mark Andrews is the only guy that's, I guess you could say, is the most reliable off the Ravens. But they really don't have any star power outside of Lamar Jackson, and people have learned how to play him, especially with no weapons. Or maybe it's a case of they're not using the weapons they have. So it's definitely the Chiefs to lose. I guess that's honest to say.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think, like you said, I don't know if it's they don't haven't used the weapons the correct way, but I do know that like Mark Ingram has been out with injuries for the most of the year, so J.K. Dobbins has kind of carried the load in that point. I think they've had a couple tight end injuries that's kind of set them back just a little bit, not a lot. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of an NFC team that may make a run, and besides the Panthers, I don't really see anybody. Maybe the Vikings. They're kind of Dalvin Cook's getting hot. Um, you could say the Cardinals, but I think they're kind of solidified themselves as a playoff team. Because like right now you have, and this will kind of get us into our next topic with the Super Bowl conversation. You have Green Bay, Tampa, New Orleans, Seattle, and then you have Arizona at the 5 or 6 spot, maybe 4. Um, I mean, other than that, I'm looking at Minnesota, Carolina, and that's about it. That's the only team that I feel confident in saying like, hey, these guys can make the playoffs and make it a legitimate game. Like you still have, I guess it would be the Eagles, maybe the Giants get in from the NFC East, but I think they're going to get first round. It don't really matter who they go up against.
Yeah, the NFC East kind of just is a wash. Um, the Cardinals could make a run. I think if you were talking about any team making a run, it would have to be the Cardinals. You said it last week, which I guess can kind of roll us into our next topic. The Saints, they're your Super Bowl pick now for the NFC. New
Yeah, when
Orleans Saints.
when they got Quan Alexander and just the way Michael Thomas is back, and we touched on it earlier. Drew Brees and Sean Payton at the beginning of the year just struggled, and I think that's kind of what Tampa Bay is still going through, was just those growing pains to start the year. Um, it's just they haven't had a chance to fully click yet, and the Saints have clicked. And the Seahawks, they've looked suspect multiple times this year, even against the Dolphins. And that was one of the games where the Dolphins they came out with a win, but the Dolphins were still finding themselves. It's just the Saints look good. To me, the Saints look like the best team in the best complete team in the NFC. I'll say that.
Yeah, having Michael Thomas back for sure. Um, he's been playing so long, or he hasn't been playing for so long. They've kind of had to create their own different identity, I guess you could say, because last year he was getting 8 to 12 touches a game, 14, 15 targets. But now that he's back, and you've already seen, everybody's seen what Alvin Kamara has done. Emmanuel Sanders in the games that he's played, especially his last three that he's played in, he's been great. So, I respect your take. I told you that last week, but I'm still sitting with the Seahawks. I'm still bought in on the Seahawks. I think their offense is just great. Their defense is not so good, but their offense has just been so good it just complements them, and they've only lost 2 games, so I think the Cardinals, that's the best game they've played all year when they beat them. So who knows? Who knows? It's definitely, and the Packers could do it. I don't think they have enough offensive weapons. I think Devontae Adams is great, probably been the best receiver while he's been playing. I know he's missed several games, but when he plays, he's definitely the best receiver in terms of a stat line. But Saints, Seahawks, I think I'm leaning with you. That's the two right now that I think are gonna emerge as the favorite heading into the back half of the season.
Yeah, to me, just the Seahawks offense. You have so many weapons you have to worry about. Um, but I think if you find a way to not, I wouldn't focus on shutting down both of them. I would focus on shutting down one and making the other one beating you. And I think that's what the Saints would focus on doing. But they would probably shut down Lockett or Metcalf, make the other one beat you. And if you put them that way, it kind of puts a lot of pressure on them. And I just don't see that panning out for them in that sense. But the Seahawks defense has just looked so suspect through the air that I don't see them being able to outscore um, the Saints when all their weapons are around. I don't see them being able to slow down Aaron Rodgers and keep him from putting up points and putting up yards. And then same thing with Tampa Bay. Like if Tampa Bay has one of those games where they're clicking, I don't see that defense being able to outscore um, Tampa. It's just more of a these games are going to turn out being a shootout. It's not going to be a defensive game, and I don't see Seattle's offense being able to keep pace with them in the late in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, and here lately over the last couple of weeks, the Vikings have emerged as a team that's like, hey, I know their record says 3-5, but with Dalvin Cook on the field, you can argue he's worthy of MVP talk. He's definitely not going to win the MVP, I don't think, but he has scored a touchdown every single game. So the Vikings are a team that can beat anybody in the NFC, if you ask me. And as far as Tampa Bay, I said it earlier, I think they'll figure it out. But, if it's this year, who knows? If it's next year, who knows? But at some point, I do think they will figure it out.
Yeah, I agree with that absolutely. And the thing, I think I mentioned this last week. It hurts me to say that at the end of this year, Drew Brees will probably retire, which means that Tom Brady's going to end up taking the touchdown record and possibly breaking other Drew Brees records. So that hurts. Like I hate that, but it is what it is. Well, we'll flip to the AFC. Like, are the Chiefs still your favorite over there, or do you think the Steelers maybe, or someone else?
Absolutely the Chiefs. I'm still sitting with them as my Super Bowl champions. I think they're going to repeat. But I'm not going to sleep on the Steelers, man. Their defense is for real. They're definitely a team that, in terms of being complete, I know Big Ben's going to be out this week, I believe, with COVID. I think that's what the fantasy report said as of, Friday. But I think it's the Chiefs to lose. They're just too good offensively. They're the most dangerous team, the most dangerous quarterback in terms of putting up points, and they've proved it this year, especially that one game against the Ravens.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the Steelers have had the Chiefs have had a couple games this year where they had to really show up, and if they don't, then you know you saw them fall suspect to the Raiders. They barely get past the Panthers. They had another game or two where they barely squeezed by, and I think if someone catches them like at the right angle, I think the Chiefs could be on upset alert in the playoffs. I think it has to be the right team. I think the Steelers could do it. I think the Ravens possibly, just depending on how well their defense plays. Um, and I think it could also be one of those sleeper teams like, um, for instance, let me look here. I'll say the Titans maybe just has one of those games where nothing's going wrong for them, and I think that could keep Kansas City from repeating. At this point, I think I'd have to kind of take the NFC over the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl if it came down to that. If it was the Steelers, though, I think I would be looking possibly elsewhere just because of that Steelers defense.
Excuse me, I've been having an allergy attack. But the Steelers, I've said it before, Steelers and the Ravens, that's going to be a tough battle to emerge as potentially the favorite to win the AFC. But I'm with you. The Titans are good. Last night they looked awful in terms of second half offense, but they've proved to be a team that can run in the playoffs. They did it last year.
Yeah, I think this year's just so weird. Like I've said it multiple times, nothing makes sense. Like you go into a week thinking logically that these games are going to be the one that are close. You don't really know who's going to come out on top. You wouldn't be surprised if either team came out on top. And then those are the games that kind of go one-sided, and then you have like the Bengals and the Eagles who end in a tie. Like Joe Burrow almost picks up a win against the Chargers in Week 1, but the kicker gets hurt in a game-winning field goal. Like, there's just so many weird things that have happened this year that it wouldn't surprise me if we see some more weird stuff to finish out the year and just throw everything kind of out the window.
Yeah, and another team that we've always talked about all season, the Chargers. They're the best 2-6 team in the league. If I didn't, have finished any game this year, didn't even know who won, I would say, man, the Chargers are probably a winning team. But you know, they've got competition in that league of teams that I think can make the playoffs that you aren't seeing right now that have showed to be a playoff team.
Yeah, so you have the Bengals who are 2-5-1. You have the Texans, the Chargers who are all 2-6. The Cowboys and the Giants are 2-7, and then the Falcons and the Panthers are both 3-6. And I think the Falcons probably should be a 5-4 team. The Panthers should be a 5-4 team. The Chargers should be a 6-2 team, I believe. They have 16-point losses or 16-point blown leads in 4 straight games.
Yep.
Texans, I think they should be maybe add another win if that. And then the Bengals should be sitting at like 4-4, somewhere around there. Like there's a lot of good teams with losing records, and that's why I'm so looking forward to the second half of the season. It's just because I feel like a team or two or maybe three are going to turn it together and kind of become a late front runner to possibly make the Super Bowl.
Yeah, if you ask me, I think the best worst team in terms of record in the league right now is the San Francisco 49ers. They're 4-5. But you look at all the injuries they've had all, throughout the season. Jimmy G, George Kittle out for, another 7 weeks, I believe. But they're 4-5 and they're competing to be a team that competed or played in the Super Bowl last year. Everyone knew that they were going to lose to the Chiefs, I believe. That's fair to say. But the 49ers are not a team that I think, when healthy, are anything short of a conference, champion or a contender at least.
Yeah, I think you can say the same about the Chargers. They have so many defensive pieces that are out, with Derwin James out for the year, Joey Bosa's out for the year. Or sorry, not Bosa's not out. His brother's out. Someone else. There's a guy or two more besides Derwin James for the Chargers who's out for the year. They just have left that defense so suspect. I think that's a lot of the reasons why they're losing those games is because they have so many people that are banged up. Um, it's costing them in those late game scenarios. So, okay, well, Joey Bosa is actually out Sunday against the Dolphins. Tremaine Pope is questionable. Trying to see if I could see who was out for the year, but I guess that's not listed on their injury report. Um, but yeah, I mean the Chargers are just so beat up. I think that's part of the reason why they are 2-6. And like you said, the 49ers, we all know that they would probably be 6-3 right now, 7-2 somewhere in there had those injuries not happened to them.
Yeah, if you didn't know anybody's record and you just said the Las Vegas Raiders and the Browns had a better record than the Chargers, I'd have said, man, you're crazy just based off performance. So another team that's been dealing with injuries too is the Browns. They're only 5-3 right now. A team that can compete. I think they're missing, in the quarterback area. I'm not really um, high on Baker Mayfield anymore. I love the guy. I love watching him play. Playing with a chip on his shoulder, but losing Odell, Austin Hooper's been out the last 2 weeks. A team that can compete, I think, when healthy. Nick Chubb's been out. He's back this week. I think they're a team that can also make a run for it.
Yeah, I do too. I think they kind of go back to with the Colts too. They're just kind of right now they're too inconsistent. Their first year with a new head coach, they're still kind of piecing things together. I think if they can just start performing steadily and losing OBJ for the year obviously didn't help their plans any at all, but they're still trending in the right direction, which is something that you haven't said about Cleveland in a long time. But nonetheless, uh, I think the
Agree.
future. You go ahead.
I was just going to say, through the first 4 weeks, they had the number one rushing, game or rushing yards per game in terms of um, two running backs. Kareem Hunt is really good. Nick Chubb is really good when healthy. So losing Odell definitely hurts, but they still, if they can establish the run game, they're a hard team to beat.
Yeah, one of the top teams in the league in terms of rushing collectively. Like you said, to start the year, they've kind of fell off a little bit. And I think that's just because teams started focusing down on it and trying to make Baker beat them, and Baker hasn't been able to do that yet. So, um, let's see. Is there anybody else you want to touch on team wise to possibly make a playoff run, or you want to go ahead and move on to the MVP conversation?
We can move on to the MVP conversation. I was just going to say the only other game I think deserves some praise this week, Las Vegas and Broncos, I believe. Yeah, Denver at Las Vegas. Broncos have looked good. I'm going to talk about them here in a little bit, but moving on to the MVPs, I think it's obvious who the top two are right now. Top three for sure.
Yeah, I've number one on my list. I've got Aaron Rodgers. Just unbelievable performance all year. He last I looked, he had like 24 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. I don't know if that was before or after the last game. Gonna pull it up really quickly. Yeah, 24 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and basically just outpacing everybody. He's got 2,200 yards on the year, averaging almost 300 a game. Um, so, like, if he keeps up that performance, I don't even think that you can realistically have anyone else in the conversation on par with Aaron Rodgers. Um, I believe I know who the other two guys that you're looking at. I'm gonna let you talk about that. But to me, I mean, Aaron Rodgers is just unbelievable. I saw another stat the other day that was talking about 400. He's close to hitting 400 career touchdowns, and the only other guys to do that, like Dan Marino, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Drew, people like that, all of them have like hundreds of interceptions, and Aaron Rodgers has 86 on his career. So I think that just kind of marks how special Aaron Rodgers is, and then at the same time how kind of slept on he is as well.
Yeah, especially with the people around him, to do the things he's been doing. You know, I've always been an Aaron Rodgers guy. I love the guy. I love watching him play. One of the most exciting, sports figures I think across all sports, to watch. But I still, my top two, I've got Aaron Rodgers and I've got Russell Wilson still. I've got, Patrick Mahomes at 2B. I've got Aaron Rodgers at 2A, and then I've got Russell Wilson at number one. I still think, he's been great. He's been kind of in the slump, but they've still been managing to get some wins. 28 touchdowns, only 8 interceptions, and plus over 70% completion percentage. He's been looking great. DK Metcalf is a freak. Tyler Lockett's great when he needs to be. When Chris Carson's healthy, that's a great team. That's a great offense.
Yeah, I think they've kind of at the same time been overshadowed by their defense, which seems to be a common trend now in the past couple of years. Not so much this year, because like we talked about, their pass defense being very suspect. But I do think that's part of the reason why Russ has never been a true MVP conversation candidate, is just because their defense has been so well that he's always been overshadowed by them and the Legion of Boom and things like that. And then to move on to our third and final candidate, I believe that would be Patrick Mahomes. Is that who you're talking about, or do you have
Yes,
somebody else? Okay, yeah. So
I
Patty
have a few. I
Mahomes.
have a few sleepers wrote down, but I think it's kind of here and here in terms of the who's going to be the finalist, and then here's people that are having great seasons, but not going to be in the final three for the MVP race.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the way that everything is set up. You like the NFL, you have a more widespread. Here's the top 6 teams in the NFL. Um, who are a tier above everybody else. But then when you get to like college, you have 3 teams that are just above everybody and everything. And then you get to the NFL MVP candidate, and you have 3 or 4 guys who are above everybody else, like you're talking about. And then college is the same way, where you have like Trevor and Justin and Mac and maybe one other guy who are just a field above everybody, and then you have another 20 players that could be a Heisman candidate if these guys didn't exist. So yeah, I think one possible sleeper um, that you may could look at would be Josh Allen. I mean, he's played well,
Respect it.
played really well. He's put the Buffalo Bills in a really good, position to win the division, make the playoffs, and make a decently deep run. And that's what the MVP is. It's not just the stats you put up; it's how well you impact your team and increase their chances of winning. So I think if I had to pick a top sleeper outside of those 3 guys, I would probably go with Josh Allen.
Yeah, I like Josh Allen. I actually wrote down Dalvin Cook. If you think in terms of value to a team, maybe not across the league, but especially to a team, Dalvin Cook is arguably one of the most valuable to his team. Um, he's scored a touchdown every game, man. I mean, I don't know what more you could ask. Leading the league in rushing, I believe. If not top two, top three for sure. Um, but he's scored every game. When he's healthy, he's definitely been the best. He's only missed 2 games, or one. He's only had one bye so far, and then he's missed 1 game with hamstring injury. But other than that, he's been a great and fun back to watch so far this year.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull up the NFL leaderboards, kind of like I do with college. So Dalvin Cook is. There's a lot more stuff here. He has the 5th longest rush in the NFL on the year. Something to note there. He has the 5th most rushing attempts, 1st in rushing touchdowns. He is 5th in rushing yards per game. Um, So yeah, he's first in some categories, but he's definitely top five in the league, and he's also only played. I think he's played one game less than majority of these other guys. And the categories where Derrick Henry is leading, that's obviously he's played this quote unquote extra game where he played on Thursday, and everybody else has to wait till Sunday to play. So um, yeah, I like Dalvin. I think Dalvin is he had what 200 yards last week, or maybe the last 2 weeks, where he's just went off and kind of carried everybody, and especially fantasy. And you all know something that hurts is he's been on my bench the past 2 weeks, and I didn't even know. Like I forgot about him even being on my team because I put him on the bench when he got hurt and missed that week or two, and
Yeah,
then picked up Miles Gaskin. So I've been starting Miles Gaskin, and then last week when Gaskin was out, I realized I have Dalvin Cook and was able to slip him in uh, for his second going off performance.
yeah. A couple weeks ago, that game was huge. I've got him in one league, in what I consider my primary league in terms of how much we bet. Winner take all type thing. But Dalvin Cook has definitely been, a MVP to the Vikings for sure. Justin Jefferson's looked good. He's emerged as somebody that can make plays for him. But Dalvin Cook, he's still holding the crown.
Yeah, Jefferson's making him a nice little rookie of the year run too. But like I said, it kind of goes back to quarterbacks kind of have above all and everybody else. So that's why Burrow and Herbert and um, I saw a very hot take earlier that said that Tua would eventually be in the conversation, and I was like, he might be in the conversation, but I don't think he's going to be a legit candidate for the rookie of the year. Kind of like Justin Jefferson, he'll be in the conversation. Chase Claypool will be in the conversation. Chase Young will be in the conversation. But at the end of the day, it's going to come down to probably Justin Herbert and Joey Burrow. So
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely, if you ask me, Burrow and Herbert top two right now. But there's been a lot of people come on that have impressed me. I think me and you have. There are people that we didn't talk about at the beginning of the season that we do talk a lot about now. Jerry Judy, he's one of them. His last two games, he's been incredible.
yeah, Jerry just kind of transitioned to somewhat our stardom center conversation. Judy was actually my starting or the start wide receiver. With them playing against the Raiders this week, the Raiders defense gave up a lot of passing yards last week to Justin Herbert, and the Broncos kind of rely heavily on Drew Lock, especially the past couple weeks. They've put up a lot of late game points, and Jerry Judy's slowly becoming Drew Lock's favorite target, or one of his favorite targets, especially with Cortland Sutton out. Drew Lock missed a couple weeks, so that kind of threw off their rhythm and timing and getting to know each other. But now that he's back and healthy, um, I think Judy's going to go off one of these games, and it's going to be pretty big. Kind of how Ruggs has. Ruggs hasn't had that game yet, but I do think it's coming before this year is over.
Yeah, I've got Judy wrote down at my flex spot because I always just do a flex just in case somebody needs a second player, second opinion on somebody. But my wide receiver starting this week, I've got Travis Fulgham, wide receiver Philadelphia Eagles. I got wrote down right here. He's 19 points per game. He's only been playing the last 5 games for Philadelphia, but he scored a touchdown in 4 or 5 games. Definitely a person. If you don't have rostered for some reason, he's still there in your league. Pick him up, and I would definitely start him this week. Playing the Giants, who he had 19 points against, or only 12 points against. Sorry, his lowest points in 5 games, but still 12 points last time they faced. So Philadelphia is a team that's it's weak this week or this year in terms of fantasy players. Miles Sanders been out, Zach Ertz, Goddard.
Yeah, I'm kind of deciding if we want to. Should we do our sit on wide receiver, or should we start with quarterbacks and actually get?
Yeah, we can go ahead and roll with the wide receiver. Sit him and
Okay,
then just go back to the top.
yeah, that'll work. So my sit-em this week is DJ Moore. The last 2 weeks, he has only registered 2 catches per week. So he's put up 10, I think 11 combined points when you add in like the decimals. So he's only getting about 5 points per game, maybe 6 in the past 2 weeks, and going up against the Buccaneers this week, who has a really really good defense. I think DJ Moore is probably a guy to keep on the bench, especially with McCaffrey out or possibly out. Then you have Mike Davis, who's going to come back in and get him a lot of looks, and then Curtis Samuel has kind of blossomed into a really good player recently. Didn't I think they drafted him last year or 2 years ago to kind of put him with the Christian McCaffrey role, and then just now, just in the past couple of weeks, it's kind of starting to actually develop into that.
Yeah, he's been a great. I actually added him in one league, I think 3 weeks ago when DJ Moore was out. He's been a great fantasy player, but I almost thought of the same receiver as you in terms of name. I've got DJ Chark um, at Green Bay this week. I think Green Bay is going to have a great game in terms of defensively. New quarterback had a good game last week. DJ Chark had 27, let's see, 20, 28 points, 27 points last week, a touchdown. Um, he's one of those players that can definitely score points. I think he's roster worthy for sure. But this week, I don't like his matchup against the Packers.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Packers have their defense hasn't been elite, um, but they do have really good. I think the secondary is probably one of their best aspects on that defense. D line struggled giving up their rushing yards per game. The D line has struggled with stopping the run. I'll say that to make it easy. Um, and so I mean, with the injuries at the linebacker core, then the secondary are probably the most solidified thing on the Packers right now. So yeah, I think anytime you play Green Bay, you probably want to set the quarterback and the wide receiver or two with that. Um, but I'll get us back on track with our quarterbacks, and I'll actually start with my sit-em this week, and I think this is probably going to be the first time that anyone has said this all year. I'm going to go with sitting Justin Herbert against Miami just because of what Miami's defense has been able to do all year long to quarterbacks. They've stopped Russell Wilson, as in like they've picked him off when they played. They shut down Jared Goff a couple weeks ago when they were playing. Like Miami's defense to me is just too good right now that I think if you have another solid option, and with the way the Chargers are relying on Justin Herbert right now, I feel like Brian Flores is going to have something up his sleeve to kind of slow him down. Um, I'm going to keep Justin Herbert on the bench, and chances are I will regret that the way he's been playing the past 5 or 6 weeks. But I just feel like if anyone's going to have a good game against the Chargers and really, really slow down Justin Herbert, I think it's going to be the Dolphins this week.
Yeah, the Dolphins are. I added them last week in the league. I dropped the Bears defense for the Dolphins. I think the Dolphins defense is, one of the top in the league, especially in terms of fantasy. But my quarterback sit him this week. Somebody who we talked about earlier. I said we would get into it later. Cam Newton versus Baltimore. Baltimore, second ranked fantasy team defense in the league. Um, Only giving up, let's see, 14 points per game to QBs this year. Cam Newton, he's been struggling. We talked about that earlier. I've got him sitting this week. Baltimore is their team that forces turnovers. They've got 4 interceptions on the year, 3 fumble recovery touchdowns. So Cam Newton, he's been known for fumbling, especially these last few games.
Yeah, Cam struggled all most of the year, I'd say. The beginning of the year they came off really high, almost beat the Seattle Seahawks. But yeah, the past couple of weeks, he hasn't looked like the Cam Newton that everyone expected him to be this year. Um, Still trying to kind of find his groove, and Excuse me. But yeah, so
Sleep.
a little bit. Yeah, and I slept like I think I've slept 3 hours in the past since Thursday morning, so it's definitely catching up with me. But I'll flip to my starting quarterback this week, and I'm actually going to go with the opposite of that. I'm going to go with Lamar. I think Lamar Jackson's kind of due for a big game, and I think with the Patriots, just kind of the season they've had and the way they've struggled all season long, I think Lamar is going to put up a lot of numbers this week. I think the Ravens beat the Patriots kind of handily. Um, that's my prediction. So for that reason, I think the Lamar will be the quarterback to have in your starting lineup.
Yeah, Lamar, he's definitely due one of those, two rushing touchdowns, maybe a one or two passing touchdown top games. But I'm gonna go with somebody that may shock you. I'm going based off the last 2 weeks, right at 30 points per game. That's quarterback Drew Lock, Denver Broncos. Favorable matchup this week. Um, the Raiders secondary is ranked 26th in the league. I think they're one of the close to dead last defenses overall ranked in the league. But I like Drew Lock this week. He's had 5 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks. He has thrown 2 interceptions, but nonetheless, definitely looked good, and he's been fantasy worthy.
Yeah, we talked about it just a minute ago with them relying on Drew Lock in the passing game towards the end of games to kind of put up late points, like especially how they did last week against the Falcons. I would expect them to rely heavy on Drew Lock again this week. I think Philip Lindsay's he's came back, but he's still been kind of banged up all season long. You still have Melvin Gordon, but I still think they rely heavy on Drew Lock and the air game. But I'll bet you kick us off with your running back, and you can start with your start or sit on whichever one, and then I'll bounce off you.
I'll just keep the train. I'll start with the sit 'em. I've got running back Giovanni Bernard. Um, what can you say? He's playing Pittsburgh. Talked about them earlier. A team that arguably, or if not, the best defensive team in the league. Definitely in terms of one loss because they haven't lost a game. But no Joe Mixon. I think they were expecting him to be back. I know he was projected to be back in the fantasy app, early last week, maybe Sunday night, Monday. Um, but overall, I think he struggles this week. He's had great um, few games, the last 2 or 3 games, but I think he struggles this week. Pittsburgh, I don't see them losing. Something we'll talk about later in our picks, but I'm looking for him to stay under the 9 to 10 point range.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think especially with them going up against Pittsburgh, it's just I think there's a lot of games where they try to make the quarterback beat you, and I think with the Steelers' pass rush that they have and their good defensive line and linebackers, I think the main point of emphasis is going to be putting pressure on Joe Burrow and at the same time getting like blitzing a lot to where they stop the run game. Um, I think that's kind of going to be the reason why uh, Pittsburgh wins this one in good fashion, especially coming off their performance last week. I don't really
Yep.
think that it's going to matter too much who plays at quarterback for Pittsburgh. Um, I'd like to see definitely Duck Hodges, but I just think that Steelers defense is going to have a really big chip on their shoulder this week, and I kind of feel bad for Joe Burrow because God knows he don't have anybody else that can protect him.
Yeah, I was
Um,
about to say the offensive line's horrible.
yeah, so I'm gonna go with my sit on at running back is Rex Burkhead this week. And it's kind of like what we just talked about with the Ravens. Their defense is the heart and soul. Their offense is not as good as it used to be. And the same reason I'm starting Lamar, I'm sitting Burkhead just because, like, the Patriots haven't looked good. You don't know what you're getting with them, and it's just you know what you're getting with the Baltimore defense. So for that reason, I'm gonna keep Rex Burkhead on the bench, and I wouldn't even be surprised if Damian Harris maybe had a nice game.
Yeah, if you remember earlier, I said the Patriots backfield. It's one guy will have a good game, one guy won't. That guy will have a good game the next game, and so forth. So I definitely can see that happening. But moving on to my stardom, I've got Kareem Hunt. The reason I put him down is because I've actually seen a lot of people reply to the actual NFL fantasy app asking questions about Kareem Hunt. Now that Nick Chubb is back, but I wrote this down right here, and I wanted to point it out. Kareem Hunt was a top 15 back in terms of overall fantasy points with Nick Chubb playing and on the field, and he was top 10 in reception and is still a top 10 reception back and reception touchdown um, running back in the league. So I've got him on my stardom. I love the matchup this week versus Houston. Houston's almost last, ranked, let's see, 28th in the league in team defense. So I like the matchup. I definitely see him getting some receptions, especially since OBJ's out now. So
Yeah, yeah, I like that too. I'm gonna stay with the AFC. I think all my let's see. Yeah, I think all my picks so far have been in the AFC. I'm gonna keep that trend here, and I'm going with starting running back James Conner. Uh, kind of like I touched on a minute ago, with Big Ben out and you're playing your second, third string quarterback, whoever it may be, on Sunday. I think James Conner is going to have a big day. He's kind of going to have to. Um,
mm-hmm.
I think they're going to try to get him the ball more than just running it. I think it's going to be a lot of check down, a lot of screens, a lot of swing passes, things of that nature. So I would definitely expect James Conner to have a big game altogether. Not so much a big game maybe if you're in a standard league, but if you're in a PPR, I would definitely start James Conner this week.
Yeah, James Conner, he gets the most touches, I think, from 20 to 20, especially over the last 4 games. I know his first 3 games he scored a touchdown. I think two and three of those actually to be correct, but gets a couple receptions a game, 3 or 4 receptions a game. Um, Actually, I saw in the fantasy app, I believe is his name Matthew Berry. He was talking about how kind of the same thing that you said.
Yeah, I like listening to Matthew Berry. If you don't if you're not familiar with who he is, he has a lot of good fantasy advice and so, solid performance out of Matthew Berry weekly on God, what's it called? He does a fantasy show that's tailored strictly to fantasy. Like that's all it
Yeah,
is. And I really enjoy watching that and keeping up with him on a daily basis. He's probably one of my favorite Twitter accounts out there. If you need somebody to follow for fantasy advice. But I'll go ahead and hop into our tight ends because we've already done wide receivers. So I'm gonna go with I think your stardom last week, and that's Noah Fant. Uh, he was injured against the Patriots, so he missed 2 weeks because they had a bye and then they play New England. But over the past couple weeks, he's averaging, let's see, that would be 24, 25, so like about 8 points per game, somewhere in there. But the biggest thing to me is he has not scored a touchdown since week 2 against Pittsburgh. So he's going to get you 8 or 9 points each week, no matter what. But I think with him not scoring a touchdown in so long of a period of time, he's going to find the end zone eventually. And I'm expecting that to be this week in a game where Denver relies heavily on the air raid.
yeah, I definitely see it. Kind of the same as you, a guy that started out the season hot, then hit a slump. Now he's back on the train. I'm going with Eric Ebron. Good matchup this week versus Cincinnati. Um, Ebron scored 2 touchdowns in his last 3 games, and his last 3 games he's put up 11, 14, and 11 in terms of points. So in a PPR league, If Ebron's still on the waiver, definitely pick him up. I would start him this week.
Yeah, I like that. Like you said, he slow start to the year, but he's kind of finding his way now. And that I think that was the biggest thing was at the beginning of the year was how is he going to find his role in the offense.
Yep.
And I think this week is or this point in the season, you're kind of starting to see him uh, develop into the role that we kind of all knew that he would. But going with my sit-em this week, I don't have one particular player. I have a group of players, and I believe it is my first NFC pick of the day, and that's the Tampa Bay tight ends going up against the Carolina defense. Tampa Bay, obviously they're going to throw the football, but I think you have so many weapons at wide receivers and in the backfield now that they're not going to use tight ends as much. Um, and I think even if they just try to kind of line up and run the ball a lot and then use play action, I still don't see them really hitting tight ends much. Um, so you may benefit from starting one, but I couldn't even tell you really who to start, one or the other. So for that reason, I'm just going to kind of play it safe and keep all of Tampa Bay's tight ends on the bench.
Yeah, even as many good fantasy players that they have, um, after the last week or two, I guess you could say it's fair to say at least that you don't really know what to do with Tampa Bay players. Start them, sit them. Um, if you've got them on your roster, but my sit them this week is a team kind of the same situation, especially for Jared Cook. That's tight end for the Saints. Playing San Francisco this week, still got a good defense, good pass defense. Um, Jared Cook, one of those guys that had a great season last year, and now coming into a team that just picked up Emmanuel Sanders, Alvin Kamara having a fantastic year, MVP sleeper right there with Dalvin Cook. We were talking about that earlier. He's definitely one of those guys. But Jared Cook now, you got Michael Thomas back. I think you see less targets. I don't see any reason why you wouldn't throw the ball to Michael Thomas as many times as you possibly could.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Michael Thomas is going to. He didn't really have a dominant performance last week. I'm expecting him to have a truly dominant performance where he has 10 plus catches one of these weeks. If not this week, then I could see it coming next week because that's the kind of guy he is. That's why he's
Yeah.
one of the all-time leading reception leaders in the league, and it's just that's what you're going to get from Michael Thomas. It's just a question of which week is it going to be.
Yep.
So yeah, I like that too. Um, so let's see. Did you have anybody else wrote down in the flex that you want to talk about, or do you want to go ahead and wrap up with the defense?
No, that was it. We can roll on to the defense.
Yeah, so defense this week, I'm gonna go a little bit of a different route, and I know they've been suspect all year, but I'm gonna go with Seattle. I think the Rams are kind of struggled on offense. They're not as bad as they were last year, where their O line is um, terrible. Last year they were terrible, and I mean awful. Jared Goff had no time for nothing, kind of like Joe Burrow this year, where they still kind of may do, but it wasn't pretty, and it was very very suspect to be a quarterback back there. I'm gonna go with Seattle this week. I think they play really well. They kind of get back on track. Um, so I think the Seattle defense is one of the main reasons why they win this game against Los Angeles on Sunday.
Yeah, I can see it. Jamal Adams finally getting back in the groove. Seattle's defense, who at the beginning of the season was, in terms of fantasy, was a top 15 team. But my starting this week, team we talked about earlier, I got Green Bay playing Jacksonville. I know Jacksonville kind of had a what if game last week and it went in their favor. But this week, I think going to Green Bay is a team that knows that they're on a hot streak right now. I think their defense is going to be out. I'm looking to cause some chaos, and I can see them, getting an interception or a fumble or maybe even a touchdown throughout the day. Who knows? But for that reason, playing at Green Bay, I think they play better at home, their defense speaking. But I got them at my stardom this week. So if you got Green Bay, I'd pick them up if you don't have them.
Yeah, I like that too, especially with Minshew out. Um, their quarterback didn't play bad last week against Texans, but it is the 2-6
Yeah.
Houston Texans, so he's gonna look a little better than he actually is. I'll say that. Now, if he comes out and performs the same way this week, then we're talking about a little different thing here. But I'm gonna go with kind of the route I said earlier, and that's just go with the Baltimore defense overall. The kind of the reason you set Rex Burkhead, the Ravens defense is just really dominant, and the Patriots I don't see them being able to combat that. So I would say start them this week. And on the flip side of that, if you're Chicago and you have Chicago and they are your defense, I think you need to drop them as soon as you watch this video and pick up somebody else, because I feel like Dalvin Cook is going to have a big day. And even if he don't, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, um,
Irv Smith's been doing great.
yeah, Irv Smith has been playing really well. There's just so many weapons on the Vikings offense that the Vikings, the Vikings offense is going to run all over Chicago. Matt Nagy gave up play calling duties. Did you see that?
I did
Uh,
not.
yeah, I'm pretty sure that was this week. He gave them up to the OC, but I still don't think that's going to make much of a difference. And I think Minnesota runs all over Chicago.
Yeah, I definitely respect that. I definitely respect that. Definitely agree with you. Like we said earlier, Dalvin Cook is phenomenal. Um, but my sit 'em this week at defense, team may surprise you. I'd like to hear your take on it, but I got the Bills this week sitting, playing at Arizona. I think Arizona is going to put up points. Overall, I think Buffalo wins the game. I really do. I think it's a close one. I think it's one of those low 30s, high 20s games. Kind of like they played with the Seahawks a couple weeks ago. I think it's going to be great. But I like the Bills defense to stay on the bench this week.
Yeah, I think I'd have to agree with you on that. Playing up against Arizona, who put up a lot of points, a lot of yards last week. Um, I definitely have to agree with that. I think you go with your gut, keep them on the bench, just because the Cardinals' offense they've looked really well all season, not just in the past couple of weeks. They've looked really well as a whole for the entirety of the season. So yeah, I definitely agree with that.
I guess that. Do you have anybody else? Maybe a flex sit 'em, flex start 'em person we haven't talked about.
Um, I don't think so. I think nobody that you could say that wouldn't really be obvious. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I had this wrote down last week, and we actually didn't talk about it. I'll throw it in right here because it's kind of perfect spot. Somebody, if he's still on your waiver, you need an extra flex spot. I would look at Christian Kirk. Christian Kirk's last 5 games have been great. He's been a top 25 receiver the last 6 weeks. So if you still see him on the waiver, add him. I would start him until we say otherwise. Just stay updated. It's definitely a guy I think is their number two back person, I guess you could say, in terms of points behind D Hop. But do you agree with that? What do you think of that?
Yeah. I think he's one of those guys that he's kind of in a between him and D Hop, they're kind of in a Juju and Chase Claypool role right now, where it's one guy's going to go off, one guy's kind of going to suffer, um, but you never really know who that's going to be. Like I feel like they kind of go in 1 week game plan for this guy to have a big game because they know this guy's going to get a lot of attention, or vice versa. And I think that's kind of the same thing going on right now with D Hop and Christian Kirk. Because if you focus too much on D Hop, then Christian Kirk can beat you, but you can't not put focus on D Hop. So yeah, I definitely like that take.
So moving on to the picks, I guess that would be the last thing.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, we can fly through these really quick. I think we talked about some of these, so we can't cover the Colts, obviously. I'll try to
So
get
I did
away.
say that I like them before the game the other day. I texted you that.
Oh yeah, yeah, you're the reason I bet on them. No cap. Like because I was gonna pick Titans. I had a parlay and I was gonna put them in it, and yeah, you convinced me otherwise. So but yeah, so I'll try to get away from the non-obvious games. So Ravens, Patriots. I think we're both gonna go with the Ravens in that one. Um, Packers, Jacksonville. I've got Green Bay. I'm assuming you probably do the same.
Green Bay.
And then New Orleans and San Francisco. I think we probably agree that that's the Saints right now, just given the
Yeah.
how banged up the 49ers are. Any other game you think is kind of one-sided? Maybe Detroit and Washington.
Yeah, Detroit and Washington depends. I've got Washington winning that game.
Yeah, I can agree with that. The past couple weeks I've always been like, all right, this is a game where Washington wins if Alex Smith is a quarterback, but given it's Kyle Allen, the other team's gonna win it. That's kind of the way it's looking at, and that's the
Yeah.
way I'm looking at this one. I'm like, Alex Smith is finally at quarterback. He's starting. And I hate that what happened to Kyle Allen. I hate that, but I'm glad Alex Smith is finally getting a starting job and or starting getting to start. I'll say that
Yeah.
after what he went through. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Washington as well. What about Houston and
Between well, I
Cleveland?
was, between even Houston and Cleveland, I think that's a toss up. I've got them on. I've got Houston on. I guess you could say upset alert. Got a star beside them, but I'm taking Cleveland this week. I think Cleveland, Nick Chubb coming back. I think it's going to be a coming off a bye. I think they're going to be fresh as a team, fresh legs. I think they're going to play good 4 quarters. But I'm not going to say I'll be surprised if Houston wins.
Yeah, like we were talking about, there's a lot of 2-6, 2-7, 3-6 teams in the league that are a lot better than what their record shows, and I think Houston says that. With Cleveland coming off a bye, I think that's about the only thing they have going for them. Houston didn't impress me last week against Jacksonville, so I'm gonna go with Cleveland this week just because they've had that extra week to kind of adapt to how they're gonna be without OBJ and with their running backs both being healthy. So I'm gonna go with Cleveland this week. But let's see. Eagles Giants, the battle for the worst best team in the
Worst,
NFC East.
worst division,
Yeah,
worst
so
division in the league.
yes, I'm a. It's kind of a toss up too. Were the Eagles on a bye last week? I believe they were,
Yes.
weren't they? Yeah, so they're
Yeah.
coming off a bye too. But the Giants have looked really well the past couple of weeks. Ever since the game where Dak got hurt, their offense is very clicking, and it's kind of the same thing. Christian McCaffrey got hurt, Panthers offense picks up. Saquon gets hurt, Giants offense picks up. So very, very weird position nonetheless. I'm going to take New York. I don't feel too confident in that because I wouldn't be surprised if Philadelphia wins, but I am going to go with New York winning that game.
I'm about to go opposite of you. I like Philly in this game. I think Philly's defense has looked, better than most teams because we said it earlier. Defense in fantasy this year is a weak spot. There's like 3 or 4 teams that are just consistent, and then after that, if you're especially in a 12, 14 man league, it's probably rough scraping the bottom of the barrel. But nonetheless, let's see. Have we talked about Tampa Bay and Carolina?
We talked about them. We never gave our pick on them.
I was about to say that's a game that I think is going to be a close one. You've been bragging about Carolina. I think they're kind of in the same boat, I guess you can say, as Philadelphia. Uh, excuse me, Philadelphia. I think they're both teams. That's why I was trying to tie them together. Um, can compete for a playoff spot based off of the division and looking at the end of the season, who they play. But I like both of them. I'm taking Carolina in this one.
Yeah, I am too. And the only thing that scares me about this game is Tampa Bay is going to have one of these games where they come out and they look very dominant and
Yeah.
they quote unquote turn things around. I don't see that being this week. I got the Panthers winning, and that's strictly just because I like their defense. I like the way Teddy Bridgewater's been playing. And this will carry us into our next pick, the Dolphins and Chargers. I got the Dolphins winning that just because of their defense. I think they're, last week we saw them let Tua go. Tua had a couple good scrambles. He just took care of the football. Made a couple mental errors as far as almost threw a pick on the sideline, had an intentional grounding, and another quote-unquote bonehead play that he wouldn't normally make. But they were letting him go. Like, they let him move in the pocket. They let him throw. They didn't seem to have him sheltered. And I think that's going to be, between that and the defense, going to be a reason why they beat the Chargers this week.
Yeah, another one I'm going to take different than you. I think the Chargers finally slip through and get that W that they much need, and I think it's this week. Um, I think Miami's defense is still a team that, in terms of fantasy, will put up 8 to 10 points, maybe even 11 this week. But I'm rolling with the Chargers. I think it's a sloppy game. I think we see maybe a turnover or two from Herbert. But on the bright side, the Chargers have a good defense too. They haven't really played up to what you can say the hype going into the season that we talked about, but I like them this week. I think they find a way to force Tua to get his first turnover this week.
Yeah, it's coming. One of these days, Tua's got to throw a pick.
Yeah.
So I could see it being this week. I think they play the Broncos next week too. So the Miami's in a really good position to win a couple in a row here. I think they've already won 4 in a row to make it 5, 6, maybe even 7. But yeah, it'll be interesting. Another really good game. It's actually, I think they're kind of all really good games. But the one we're going to talk about next is the Bills and the Cardinals. Um, I, I think I'm going to go with the Arizona in this one, and it kind of comes back
Yeah.
to just the defensive standpoint of things, where Josh Allen's going to put up points, but Kyler Murray and the Cardinals defense, just if the defense plays well, then Arizona's going to come out on top in this one.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like Arizona's offense to be the better in terms of offense defense this week. Kind of the same reasons as you. But I think it's a close one, though. I think this is one of our top 2, top 3 games of the week in terms of points scored and how close they are.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I gave my pick on this one. Seahawks Rams. I'm rocking with Seattle.
Yep,
I
same.
think I touched on that a bit earlier. Anything you want to add on to that one?
No, I'm with you. I think Jared Goff has a good game. I think Seattle ultimately, wins the game by 2 or 3 touchdowns. But Los Angeles, we could see a game where they throw the ball really well.
Yeah,
Seattle's known to definitely give them up.
I think so too. I would love to see that. I'd love to see a really high-scoring game and whatnot. But I guess we'll have to see on Sunday. I think that's 3. That would be the 3 o'clock window game.
Yep.
And then so the Bengals and Steelers are also a 3 o'clock window game. Defense wins championships, and defense is going to win the Steelers this game against the Bengals without their starting quarterback in Big Ben.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Steelers find a way somehow, some way. I think they do, and not a bad defense to rely on when you got to in a game like this.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, hey, again, defense wins championships. Defense is going to be the reason that the Ravens beat the Patriots. I said that Lamar Jackson was going to be the quarterback to start, but nonetheless, I think the defense is going to be the reason that they beat the Patriots, and it's not even going to be close.
Yeah, I had Cam Newton on my sit-em for quarterback this week, so I'm with you. Defense, Baltimore, I like them this week.
Yeah. Then we'll finish up with the Monday Night Football game, Vikings at the Bears. I believe that's correct.
Yep.
I've got Dalvin Cook. I've got the Vikings offense, and I've got the Bears kind of in a position that a lot of NFL teams are finding themselves in when they don't really know what's going on with them and still trying to find themselves. I'm going with Minnesota winning that one.
I'm with you. I think Minnesota wins. I think Chicago does find a way to slow Dalvin Cook down. I think it's kind of exposed this week, but that's why I'm saying that Adam Thielen's going to have a big game. I expect him to have one or two touchdowns this week. So I'm with you. I'm rocking with Minnesota. I like him by a touchdown, maybe two scores.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of games this week that I think we kind of agree on that are all one-sided, but I would say it's about half and half. It's like 7-7. There's 7 games that are like, okay, these are kind of for sures, and then there's another 7 games that are like, I'm not really too confident in, but I wouldn't be surprised if it goes either way. Um,
Yep.
but yeah, so I know your phone's dying. It's 2:37 in the morning. Is there anything you want to add before we get out of here and prepare for college football Saturday?
No, that's it. Definitely some games to pay attention to this week. If you got any fantasy questions, please ask us. I'll try to stay as updated as possible as I can with info. I know I'm a league manager in a couple leagues, so I'll try to help out with those guys. So if you got any questions, just shoot them our way.
Yeah, so you'll see this video if you're watching it. This will be Saturday night, so you still have plenty of time to send us a message or leave a comment on the video or whatever on Facebook, however you want to get in contact with us if you have any fantasy questions or if you just want to talk football, maybe talk college football, whatever it may be. You can get in contact with us on Twitter. All the links are in the description below. You can check out our apparel there as well. But yeah, so episode 10 is in the books. I think it's been about half and half, probably 5 college, 5 NFL. I think we had a couple
Yep.
weeks where we did college only. So yeah, about half and half, still about 40 subscribers, over 2,500 views, somewhere in there. So the growth is there and having a good time doing it. We appreciate everybody that's tuned in and been here throughout the ride. And we will see you guys Tuesday, I'm assuming, on episode
Yep.
11, recapping college football week 10, week 11.
Week 10.
Yeah, so have a good weekend, guys. Enjoy your Saturday night, and we will see you guys next week.
Appreciate it.